Hi, everyone. This is Cindy Huang.
Hi, everyone. This is Yana.
Welcome to our Close Encounters episode 7. Today, we have two very, very special guests with us. Farooq, all the way from the UK, who's the veteran producer of Akram and a lot of other multiple amazing projects. And then we also, all the way from the East, we have Ling with us in Shanghai, who is now writing head of programming at a new theater that's about to open. And previously she was with the Shanghai International Arts Festival. So today, before I bring them on, just to give them a brief intro, we have a bit of this conversation. It's a burning topic for me already for the last, I think, more than a year actually, is the idea of accessibility and inclusivity in the arts world. And, we want to provoke a little bit today, provoke people's thinking actually, and provoke and challenge and encourage people to really think about what these two words means. But without further ado, why don't we let these two guests introduce a little bit. Again, I'm just looking for my frame, so I have Farooq in front of me now. Go ahead, Farooq.
Hi everyone, it's Farooq Chaudhry from London. A little bit traumatized by our football loss yesterday in the European final and probably drunk way too much for my own good, but I'm really pleased to be here with you guys. It's really hard to be called a veteran, Cindy. I mean, you make me sound really old. I mean, I've only been working with Akram for 20 years.
Only 20. Only 20.
Right. Only 20.
Only 20, yeah. But I'm co-founder of the Akram Dance Company with Akram back in 2000. Former dancer who then did an arts management degree and then became a producer. I didn't know I was a producer until someone started calling me one. And then started my own company alongside Akram back in 2013, where I then sort of branched out and did work with the English National Ballet as a creative producer. I started to work with Yang Liping in China as their international creative producer to work, help look at how the work could be produced for more international touring. And most recently, I've become the artistic director of a new company called China House Arts in London, which is really looking at international collaborations between China and the rest of the world, and how, quite simply, how beautiful things can happen when different worlds meet. And that's very much what I live by in all the work that I do.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Ling Mao, and I just joined a new theater called Young Theater, but it is not a theater only for young people. It's called Young Theater because it's located in the Yangpu district of Shanghai, because they share the similar pronunciation, Yang and Yang. And previously, I worked at the China Shanghai International Arts Festival as acting head of program exchange department. Our department is responsible for the festival's annual performing arts fair, forum, and international relations. And I met all the people here today at the China SPAF, the Performing Arts Fair. And our festival also used to work internationally, like we work with Farooq for Yang Liping's Writer Spring, this work. And for the new theater, this young theater, we want to target for a younger age, maybe about 18 to 45 this age, and we want to position this theater as an inspiring and inclusive art hub, because it's located in the district where many old people and families, and we want the venue to be inclusive, not too far away from people's life. And apart from that, I also work as a virtual reality producer, working with artist Damin Zhang for several VR works. That's briefly about myself.
Awesome. Well, you brought up one of the words, right? Inclusive. And
Yeah.
And I think I love to start off that conversation is how, I think it's important to really define or to clarify what that means, the word accessibility and inclusivity. We use it so much now, especially this last year. I think our industry, the arts world, is talking about these two words so much, but have we really you know, they try to dissect it, they try to toss and turn it in so many ways, but have we really, you know, has it really been defined in a way that people understand it? Because from where I think, you know, Ling sits and where we sit in the West, those two words could really mean different things, and what we're trying to achieve. So I don't know, Jana, did you want to sort of take it off from Berlin to the UK, and then maybe Ling can think about? I mean, to me, it's crucial. It's a crucial word, but I think we need to clarify it first.
I think I totally agree. And we were talking about this yesterday or the day before for quite a long time, actually, just about how we want to use, or how we use the words. For me, to be honest, I will just pick one for now. I will say inclusivity. I think to be inclusive is much more than just, you know, programming something or trying to make people watch or understand or listen to something I feel they have to listen to. For me, it starts with listening to them, like going out there and listen to what is actually happening. Like for you, Ling, when you say you have this new theater, what is the topic, or what are people thinking about, or what is their approach, or what are their problems? It starts with listening, from my point of view, because that's how you actually really integrate people, by listening to what they need or what they have in mind. That's just, and referring to Berlin, this is not really happening here as well. I'm just saying, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but I miss that here in Germany as well.
Yeah, for me, I want to use the word inclusive. Yeah, I agree that to be inclusive, you need to first listen to people. And I also position this word in this new theater because I think in China, many venues, people are not that very often theater goers. For them, going to theater is something like to learn or to experience some the so-called fine art. But I don't think art has the so-called high art and low art. And so I want to and also in China, many theaters, they only open when the show is on. For all the other time, they're just closed, like very cold architecture, you just walk by. But I really want this venue to be inclusive, to be more close to ordinary people. It may be like a sitting room, you just walk by and go there and sit. It's not something you have to pay respect for it. You have to something like to go there to be educated. I don't want that kind of impression of theater to let audience in China to have that kind of impressions.
Oh, Farooq, you're muted.
This word inclusivity has been driving me nuts because it's just a word.
Yes, it is. I know.
And there's nothing more. And actually, like all words, they're loaded with meanings. And where does that meaning come from? Who decides that meaning of that word has value? And so I think what I'm really trying to push for is to move away from this idea of a singular truth in the meaning of words. And the fact is, we are living in a pluralistic world, and there are many truths coexisting. Yes. And so once we accept that fact, then we can also accept the fact there are many stories to be told. And so the idea of engagement with people, and going back to Ling Mao's theatre, is that, you know, this is not a space for making an academic or intellectual frame for these words, but a place where people can share their stories from a deeply personal and authentic place. And that's what inclusivity means to me. It's about the space for pluralism, a place for people's stories to be told with honesty, with humanity, but it's their story and with authenticity. And I think we're not, and there's a dominant canon. I talked about this before, where we say these words, but who's deciding that is the right use of the word? And I fear that word is coming from the industries controlled by certain movers and shakers, mostly the West, I would say, sadly. You know, they have the resources, they have the big festivals, they have what you call the credibility. You go to the festival, you're suddenly important. And that's imbalance right now. Yes. So this is really the thing. And I'm talking about the big macro picture, and going back to Ling Mao, you know, it's right, the theatre is not a theatre, it's a home. It's a place where you
Yeah.
belong. It's not a place where you educate yourself. It's a place where you experience. It's a place where you realize what it means to be a human being. And I think we limit ourselves because we are using too much of this kind of bureaucratic, academic, intellectual framing for the way we understand things, you know. So, and also just one last thing to add to that, sorry, about the idea of inclusivity, and then shifting that, slightly digressing to the idea of market. One of the things that personally bothers me is that we don't see countries and other people, as we see the theatre as a school, as an education, we're seeing countries as markets rather than cultures. So for instance, I think the West looks at China as a market, not as a culture. Now, if they wanted to understand China as a culture, you would dive deeper. Your curiosity would begin to know what matters to the Chinese. Equally, if the Chinese went to America and the West, they would dive deep and not see it as a market and realize the commonality of the human condition. And I think that's what we're trying to. Inclusivity is about finding what holds us together, but also what beautifully separates us.
I think I totally love that thought. I mean, thoughts, it was more than one, but I mean, first of all, like what I is like, it's kind of an empty frame. Like, it's like, you know, you can use word, but you can use words by not saying a thing. It's just using words. So that's what you say. And also, I mean, I have to say, like, when it comes to theater, so what does theater, what we do in theaters, it's like, how can you educate without teaching? You know, I mean, I don't want to go into the theater and be taught all the bloody time and just sit there and feel maybe even stupid because I feel like, oh, I didn't know anything about this. So it's like reading a fairy tale. You know, I can sit down and tell the kids, so now I'm opening a book. A book is really important and I'm going to read a fairy tale. And the fairy tale is really important because, or I can just sit down and start the bloody fairy tale. And they will listen straight away because they will be caught by what I'm saying, by the words, by the story. And that will open up to questions, probably saying, oh, but there is a dragon. Which country are we talking about? Where is the dragon? You know, or whatever story you tell.
Yes,
that's
also,
sorry.
Yeah, that's also another part of maybe the so-called inclusivity that I want to address in this new theater is that we want to provide a better experience for audience. I mean, for audience to go to see a show, we want to give them more background information for them to better understand the work. Because for some contemporary work, maybe you need some pre-talk or workshop to help them better understand, to have a better experience. Otherwise, if you sit in a post-show talk in China, you will find many audience are asking, "What are you talking about? What is the show about? What is this? Am I understanding right?" You will feel this lots of this kind of this kind of questions. I mean, for a mature audience, I want a mature audience to have your own opinion, to have your own understanding based on your experience. But in China, I think you need to go through a process. This process will help you first understand, or maybe understand a better way how you can enjoy a show, not just to want to know if I am understanding it right or not.
Ling, I think sorry, just to add to that, I think that's a very similar problem in the UK. I think there's a notion that because you're using the educational framework of that something is right and something is wrong, when you're experiencing something, that stops growth, that stops curiosity, that kills the ability to kind of let the imagination be part of the experience, right? You know, because it's what you see and what you feel and what you observe, what makes art so beautiful. It allows you a space to be connected with that experience. You're looking for connection, really, rather than understanding. But I get you, because I know that we've got to find a way. And I know each culture's got a different process and a different speed. And you know, and I talk about when we want to make change, there's only one speed that makes change, and it's called the speed of trust. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you have to move at the speed of trust with and know who they are, know what makes them tick. They have to know what makes you tick, know what they can. And that relationship will begin the moment, when you start to build trust with your audiences. And so they can begin to ask questions, but they also have the confidence to feel, you know what, I can imagine, and that's enough. There was a great story when I first took Akram's work to China back in 2003, where a guy got up in the audience, like on the phone, and was like talking to his wife really vigorously, and they're trying to do the performance, right? And everyone's going crazy. And then Akram just asked afterwards, what was he talking about? And he said, he was telling his wife what a great show it was, and he saw dragons, and he saw this, and he saw that, and in a way that's quite beautiful, even though it was
totally.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's like when you, it's a fantastic story, and it's true what Ling said. I mean, when you're I was a dancer as well, and I started off with classical ballet. I love classical to the day. I'm not as good anymore, but I'm trying. But the thing with classical ballet is there is a right and wrong. There is the tendu, like this is how you do it right. This is how you do it wrong. Yeah. But that's what you said about process. For me, during my education, I realized there is modern dance. There is a way to escape this like really strict form of right and wrong by, finding new ways of moving around and doing things. And for me, besides I felt like a little bit stuck because I was like, oh, I was wrong. Oh, yes, I was right. And all of a sudden it became like, it started flowing, and there were new movements. And that's when I slowly went into the more modern area. But it's a process. As you say, it's not someone walks in and says, oh, from today on, you don't have to think about right and wrong anymore. Just go off. This would have never worked for me personally. And I think that's not how human beings, it's a process. And it's absolutely, I love the idea of, taking people back and follow, presenting like a possibility to start that journey, which is so important.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think the thing is when we start becoming prescriptive, and we start telling people what they need and how it should be, and we start imposing our values. And this is the problem with inclusivity around the world. There's a dominant cultural system that is imposing its perfect image of itself on the rest of the world. Right. And this is, things never change like this, and it perpetuates the divide. And I think in microcosm between audience and artist, and venue and audience, and venue and artist as well, that having that space of going back to what Ling was saying about listening, because listening is I always think listening is a lifetime of free education. It's really free, and just observing and encouraging a point of departure rather than an outcome-based relationship will free us up in ways with the audience and in ways that we can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, totally. There's so much that's just, all the words that are coming out, right? It's same thing in like classical music. I mean, people are scared of it because you go in and then they get yelled at because they're clapping in between movements. Like, right? Like, why are you clapping? We're only in the first movement. And then, and then you yell at them once and they'll never go back again. Right. So I think, it goes back to that word that I use, and Yana and I talked about is like, I think we become too patronizing. Like, why is it, we're always trying to tell people, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, you go to a rock concert, no one's telling you what to do. You go and have a good time, right? It's like, and I think we as an industry, and even, whether it's the arts leaders, the venues themselves, or artists themselves, we confine ourselves in this box by all of these rules. And I say all the time, we're in the creative industry. If you're in a creative space, why are you limiting all of these parameters? Why are you setting all these parameters so that people can't even access? And that's also accessibility. It's all of these, like you said, like we're constantly trying to educate, whether it's coming through the theaters, right? You come into the theaters and the theaters already tell you, you can't do this. These are the rules and regulations to abide by, right? It's like, yeah.
And I mean, talking about young audience, I mean, there, when you're between 15 and 20, and I think that refers to every young person on this planet, you've been educated by the school, by your parents, by literally everyone. So the last thing you want is to be educated by another person, institution. And at the same time, your hormones are on a carnival tour in your body, going insane. So you're against everything. So why, there is a reason why young people don't access or don't enter, like they go to a rock concert, like a really great example, but they don't go to the theater, not because they don't like the art, because they don't even know what's happening there, but because everything beforehand is already like boring, educating, too strict, too not pop art. And this is, which leads me a little bit to a question, like we have in Germany, we have this really strict kind of unspoken rule. If you're a real artist, you have to marketing yourself as a real artist. You cannot use certain colors, you cannot become too pop arty, but that already excludes a big audience. Cool. Whereas when you become too, when you say, oh, fuck it, I'm a great artist and I will, market myself, I will do great marketing. Everyone says, yeah, but that's not art. That's a musical. That's too commercial. And I'm, for me, I look at them and I'm like, why? Who says that? And don't you see that you are actually not opening, that you're only opening one door instead of two by saying that one is too pop art, it's not arty enough. So
I think going back to what you're saying about, the patronizing bit, because, we know there is a great deal of value, intrinsic value of having an artistic and cultural life to everyone, and if they get the opportunity to engage and they've done it on their terms and they own the experience instead of, sold the experience, if you know what I mean, it makes a difference to people a lot of the time. I've taken people who've never gone to a dance show and watched it and come away, thinking, wow, I've just got to do more of that because that is so incredible. But I do think that defending of these codes and these values are outdated, and it's because it means so much to us. It's a bit like a parent trying to talk to a child. You're defending something because you know it's going to make a difference, and that energy is pretty it's dominant. It's not collaborative. It's not working with a person, it's telling a person what to do. And I think, and I dare to say, I think some the more liberal minded are sometimes the worst culprits because, I'm liberal, I'm free thinking, I know what it means. And sometimes it stops even the inclusivity and the element gets kind of shut down by liberal thinking because there's a sense, I'm already doing it by talking about it. But if talking about it needs more, there's a different way. And you're right, Yana, there are codes. And, and we all know for art to thrive, it has to destroy itself. It has to transform and change and be relevant to the times in which it lives. So this idea of the black and white, a certain very minimalist thing, without color, that's not fair anymore. That's not fair. That's not, that doesn't give. And that shuts people down. And we know that audience is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. And it's definitely not a question of money, because I know I've got a 17-year-old daughter who paid 100 quid to go and see BTS at a concert. I paid 100 quid, she didn't pay it. The thing is, so it's about relevance, right?
Right, yes. It's another important word. It's like relevance, when I reach out to you guys, one thing it says is that because we complain, I think as an industry, we just complain all the time. Where's our audiences? Blah, blah, blah. The artist is, from the artist perspective, it's like, well, why do they not get us? And, and then from the venues, like, how do we attract more audiences? So the fingers is always pointing at others rather than looking at ourselves. And I want to open that up because it's relevance is so important, and we talk about it, yet we're not really paying attention to, well, are we really being relevant, right? And opening, and from not just the programmers, the producers, the leaders, and who's putting these policies and rules and regulations together, but it's also putting that question out to the artists, right? I was having this conversation with Yana the other day, and I said to her, I come from I come from the recording industry. I come from the record company days, I was working in major record companies, and then artists that I work with, whether it's young, it's, they're up and coming, or these multi-million, multi-platinum, artists, it's when they create and genuinely, they create because they love what they do, but they also are inspired by the fans. And and when you go to these concerts, I always remember every time when they're done with their performance, the first people they thank is their fans. But coming to the arts world, completely different. There's no thanking of the audiences majority of the times. They take their bows and then they leave. And that was one thing, that was the first thing that I really noticed, shifting coming to the arts world. And so, is that to me, I don't know how to dissect that, but I love to really pick your brains about this, why? Does artists have a responsibility too?
I think I've always said the audience are the final collaborator when an artist makes a creative process. They're not the person to sell it to, they're the person to create it with. And we've got to understand, and the we is a very complex thing, because who is we and who is us? Because it's so broken up, and I think there are some people who've been around too long, particularly in the arts industry. It recycles itself very slowly. There are certain people moving around the industry for a long time in the same jobs, and they carry with them a taste agenda, which is difficult. And I'm part of a racial equality task force at Sadler's Wells right now, and it's so beautiful to listen to Alistair Spalding say, "I know it's my taste. I put my hand up. I've made mistakes. I haven't listened. I've let my own agenda dominate, and I now need to change." And I don't think enough of our leaders are prepared to be that brave and courageous, because we're in the thing about even the commercial industry. It's still about risk.
Yeah.
It is about, those commercial artists have to take risks, even more so probably than sometimes the experimental side, because there's
a lot of money.
There's a lot of money
involved. And
exactly.
Like someone go, I don't know, be the guy who's doing the commercial for Coca-Cola or any, and then let that go wrong. You don't want to be that guy, really.
I know.
No, I was speaking to a producer from the West End, and she was telling me that, when it comes to the West End, there's no such thing as that's very good as okay. It's either exceptional or it doesn't work. Because the audience, you need 8,000 people a week to come in and see it and watch it, over a year. But look, I think there are different audiences wanting different experiences. We've got to be careful that there's not this monolith of an audience. Some people are prepared to work with the experience. They want to engage. Some people want to be, observe or be fed. We've got to respect the different way that people engage in that experience and take it away. It's and I think I always say that sometimes the more experimental side, the more public side, is we are the kind of R&D sometimes for the mainstream. We've got to take the risk. We've got to be allowed to fail. Without that, we're not going to investigate and interrogate some of these old ideas.
But don't you think, just picking up that point, because I think, like that from my experience, I think exactly that taking a risk, the fear of, failing is a huge point from the artist side, not taking the risk. Because, from my point of view, I can say, okay, becoming an artist, whatever kind, you're singer, choreographer, dancer, I don't know. You become a public figure at a certain point. So yes, you will post something, you will do something, and you will have good comments, but you will maybe at least have one bad comment or even more. So if you're not ready to handle this, you should actually, that's the question. Should you not go out there, or should you go out there and not take the risk? From my personal point of view, I think if you want to create real art, you have to take the risk, and you have to build up, a net around yourself with friends, family that supports you once you have a bad day and too many bad comments.
100%, yeah.
But I feel like there are a lot of artists not taking that step and are too scared of, not even failing within the business, but their personality, personal, not being able to sleep because, oh no, I did something wrong. And, it's more like a psychological thing.
And in response to Cindy, I really like your observation that the rock star first say thank you to their fans. Yeah. It's true. I think for some artists, when they do the creation, some of them, they just want to express what I want to do. And I'm an artist. You should listen to me. If you cannot understand, there's something wrong with you. Yes. Some artists do have this kind of... Yeah, so
I
in
mean,
that sense, I really think if you just want to create something for you, for just for yourself, that's okay. But if you want to create something for the audience, you have to put audience in your heart when you do the
That's a
creation. You have
responsibility.
to think about all the journey, all the audience experience when you do all the design, all the creative work. It's not just about you; it's about you and the audience.
So that's the responsibility of the artist. Actually.
So, in response to that, Ling, I think that's a good point, but I beg to differ slightly on it, and I know when I'm working with Akram particularly, we try not to think of the audience when we begin because it starts from a personal place.
Yeah.
And I think we're conscious of it, and we have to realize that subconsciously we are thinking about it, but we're not consciously thinking about it. So, but I think if you're starting a work, knowing that it's rooted in something deeply personal to you and something authentic is the right place to start. And it doesn't mean, and that could be different for any culture. Every culture, we go about the idea of pluralism and everyone has a truth, right? So as long as it starts from an honest place internally, then I think you can begin to explore it. I think there's a lot of pressure for an artist to start thinking, oh, I've got to think what my audience wants. I want to, will this make them happy? Will this, I think there's a danger. At some point, you will have to engage with that. But I'm not sure it's right at the beginning, because there's also the danger. If you try to please everyone, you end up saying nothing.
Yes, I agree with you. What I want to express is that, of course, for an artist, I think the most important thing is that to express something that you feel so deeply, so strongly that you want to express. But the kind of artist I just mentioned, maybe it's about relevance. For some dancers in China, when they create their first work, they usually tend to create something about the backstage, about rehearsal, about their life. But this kind of story, it's too personal. The theme it's not universal enough. That's the kind of inclusive I want to express.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I work with a lot of young artists, and I always tell them, don't make it too personal, because you need that space from something that inspires you, but you don't want to reflect that back at yourself, because there's a danger. It needs to be unpicked, so it can be an objective emotional relationship or personal relationship. Otherwise, it does. I know it's like this, and you see it and you love it, and that's the danger. I know when we're making work, we have to let the audience in, or a small number, towards the end, in the last part, because when you have something that close to you every single day, and it's not working, but you fall in love with it, you just accept it, right? And things aren't working. So I think it's a very fine balance, and I think we have to learn, sorry, using the wrong word, but we have to work with, young artists, with producers and managers to say, I know, really. And that's why dramaturgs and producers are helpful, to sit and think about, what is it you really want to say? I know you're talking about something personal, but where's the motivation for it? What is the true intention of this? And unpick that in a very simple way for them, that it doesn't become a biographical experience.
So it's a very interesting point, Ling, and it's I think so. There is a thin line, and just going back to rock stars again, like to rock music. There are a lot of examples from the rock history where a song was created by, I don't know, Bon Jovi had this like Bed of Roses, and I read this. Maybe it's a rumor, I have no idea, but he everyone was gone, and he was sitting there, and he was completely like he was in, I don't know, his wife left him or whoever, and then he wrote Bed of Roses, totally drunk at the piano, and he hated it. By the end of the night, he just threw it into the waste, and he was like, oh shit, that's crap. And then he went to sleep, and of course he was completely hangover, so he came to the studio late. And when he came into the studio, the whole band was playing the song. And he was like, because one of them picked it out of the waste and was like, oh my God, this is quite good. And it was never supposed to go on an album, because he said, yeah, but this is just me, suffering and just being totally, heartbroken. There's so many stupid ways. And then they put it on the album, and it was the biggest song ever. But that intention was that was a real moment. Whereas, not picking Bon Jovi, but and they have this big moment, and they're like, oh my God, this was a huge success, so let's copy that. And then they're trying to repeat, they're using the same words, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work if it doesn't come from a real intention.
Absolutely, Yana. And I always say that, I remember, and I'm sure you remember this being a former dancer, the worst thing you can do is if you come off stage and someone praises you and you imitate yourself the next day.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know, it's like,
Never
works. You end up being a catastrophe.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, but I think,
forever.
You know, but I go back to this idea of the beautiful. I mean, you think of the Lion King when Lion King was first taken to the producers. They thought this is a ridiculous idea. Who's going to be interested in these puppets and stuff? Now, the most successful product in the entertainment history of all time. You know, it just goes to show that people sometimes aren't ready to accept something, even the people who create them. And that sounds like maybe Bon Jovi's experience, you know, therefore we have to manage that relationship really well between, you know, allowing that risk involved with taking on new ideas, creating space for new ideas, and not falling into formulas that have worked before and repeating ourselves, because that is the biggest danger in every single instance.
Because the only topic is to please the audience. Then it becomes only pleasing the audience. It's not about feel like, you know, something that comes from you and is pleasing the audience at the same time. Then it's not too personal, what Ling said, but it's like, but when you say, oh, that worked, that cake was amazing. And then it becomes something completely different. It's just creating something that has no content or which is not real in a way. It's just, you know, like a plastic kind of thing.
And I mean, don't you think it's not even about pleasing? We're in the business of empathy.
Oh, yeah,
you know
yeah.
What I mean? You know what I'm saying? So what we want is someone to feel what we feel.
Yeah,
that's what all the musicians are doing. That, you know, it's kind of what we're trying to do.
But you know, Yang Li Ping, I went to see Under Siege, and I was like, I was jet lagged I saw it at the Shanghai Arts Festival. I was totally jet lagged, and we were doing a showcase with an interactive software artist, and he went the night before, and he said to me, next morning, he said, you have to go. It's so good. Oh my God, you have to go. And so I went, and I was like this. Because we were working the whole day, and I was like, oh my God, I loved it. And then there was the break, and before walking in, there was this guy standing at the door checking everyone's ticket, and he said, oh, this is the last scene. The last scene is about to come. And I was like, yeah, because we're heading to the end. And he was like, yeah, but you know, people are buying tickets just for the last scene. And I was like, oh, really? I've never heard that before. And it was the feathers, you know, it was
feathers. Yeah.
Yes. And for me, I sat there and I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. How do you manage to create a performance that has that impact on a huge audience? And to be honest, a lot of people here in Germany, without even watching the piece, would say, yeah, that's too commercial.
You know what, Yana, that's exactly what happened. I'm telling you, I worked with Yang on Under Siege because when she wanted to, that was her first big international work. And, you know, and you're absolutely right. I loved it. I think it was much stronger, in my opinion, than Rite of Spring. But, you know, I think Rite of Spring was a bigger risk for her, but Under Siege was something that was deeply authentic for her and personal. And it had massive success. It went to New York at the Lincoln Center, sold out 4 performances. We couldn't even get a ticket for Ang Lee to see the show. I mean, we got it. It was so big, and it was beautiful. We took it to the Netherlands. We took it to Israel. We took it, we took it to London. I mean, to Australia, Austria, and there were like in France and Germany. There was a resistance to it. It's like, this is a bit too kitsch. This is a bit too.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yes.
Exactly. You know what I think it is? It's envy. There's a lot of envy kind of thing, because somehow, I mean, that's a topic on itself. I mean, we could spend a whole conversation about 4 hours talking about why that is. But I think here, this mentality is if something becomes too big and too, like, you know, football is touching people. I mean, there's nothing more touching to see 12 men crying on a soccer field. I mean, this for me, and then you look at the audience and you see all these grown-up men, not the children, but the men, so emotional. So that's what football can do. Yeah. And what that piece did to and there is kind of like, you know, they envy the fact that someone created something that touches people, because somehow, I mean, there's not a piece here in Germany I saw, sorry to say to everyone, not that I just saw shitty stuff, no, but I never saw something that was created here that was so touching. I didn't see something like that here.
Yeah, and I think, maybe it's not even envy. Maybe it's we go back to the idea of inclusivity and going back to, you have to open the space to accept a different cultural perspective.
Yes.
And that means you have to go
Absolutely.
in empty. You can't go in with your mind full of what you think is right and wrong and what is good quality and what's not and what really will appeal. You know, I must say, and I learned that very personally working with Yang, and bless her, because when I first worked with her, I worked in Europe, I had a Northern European traditional influences, and I had to let go of that. I remember thinking I was so determined to help her get this piece to the right place, right? You know, but it had to stop interfering. I had to start listening, and I had to empty myself. So I had to begin collaboration as an empty vessel rather than a full one.
Right.
And I think that's where we need to go forward. We need to be much more empty in the modern world if we're going to accept new ways of seeing and doing things.
Right. No, it's true. I mean, I always use my parents as a perfect example, right? Like they don't go to the theaters. My dad could care less. You know, like as an Asian kid, we take piano lessons, not because they want us to be cultural. It's just every Asian kid takes, you know, piano lessons, violin lessons, or ballet lessons, because it's part of that whole, again, that colonialism of like, this is a Western thing, and Western thing, it's a status thing. It'll make your kids, you know, feel a little bit more, you know, with the upper class, so on, quote unquote. But to be honest, they could care less, right? And I took them to Under Siege at Lincoln Center 2 years ago.
Right.
My mom absolutely loved it. And, you know, my dad was like, my mom, you know, because she's a huge historian buff, like especially Chinese history. So of course, Under Siege is a historical, you know, it's a very historical, you know, in history, that's a huge story. Like everyone knows it, and it's become also pop culture. And I brought my dad there thinking, you know, because it's all on movies too, so he's seen it, so he should understand it. And it was interesting. We were on our subway ride home, and then my mom's, you know, still like talking nonstop about how beautiful the piece was and how she absolutely loved, you know, Hu Senyuan's character, the way he was absolutely she's mesmerized by his dance and everything. And then my dad just turned to her and was like, I still don't really get it. But to be honest, though, he did say, you know, it was really, he was very nice. He actually, you know, though he didn't really get it, he wasn't falling asleep, which was, you know, that already said something, right? Like the fact that piece had a level of influence that they were able to sit there. You know, my mom, who doesn't go, but she loved it, and that to me is what matters, because it's already reaching someone who would never otherwise go, you know. And then even like my 9-year-old, my son was 9 at the time, and he was mesmerized and captivated by it too.
See, right? I think that's the problem with when we become activists in our work, you know, and because you kind of got this notion that our great work, our worthy, great, noble work is going to save the world. But you actually don't. This is what I call what is it called? I wrote it down the other day. A form of kind of overblown sense of romanticism. You know, you save the world one person at a time. That's all you do. So if you take one person in and they have an extraordinary experience, that is you already beginning the process. But this notion that we have to bring the thousands, in, you know, and save them all at the same time is dismisses the individualism of each human being's experience.
And actually, it's both sides learning something. You know, I took a friend of mine to Giselle. I mean, he is like, he's going to punk concerts and rock. He has never entered a theater in his life, not for ballet, of course not for ballet, but not for music, for nothing. And then I said, let's go and watch Giselle. So that's like this is like the absolute opposite of everything he has known so far. And then he was like, and he asked me a lot of questions, and I thought, do I answer them? And at one point I was like, no, I'll just, you know, let it go. I said, just dress up a little bit. Don't even, I mean, we're in Berlin. No one gives a fuck really. So whatever. And we went to the Staatsoper, and, you know, I mean, Giselle, I mean, the whole first part is very like, you know, traditional and the blah, blah. And I saw him moving. He was like this. And then during the first part, I saw him moving towards the edge of his seat and really looking at what was happening. And then, you know, there's this break. And then he looked at me and he was like, that's hard. I mean, she went insane because he was, you know, fucking with another woman. And I was like, see, you don't even need me to tell you anything. You just have. And then the second part came, and we had it like after. He was completely blown away. And then we went to a bar afterwards, to a punk bar, and we talked about Giselle the whole night, which was kind of funny. But I learned that it was so good not to say anything, to just, for once take him there and let it go.
Yeah.
And not say, oh, you have to watch this, you have to be, oh, and this is the sign for, and this is the sign for. Just go.
I think that's a great way to do, Jana. I mean,
but that's what I mean. It teach me something. It teach him something, but it also teach me not to be too teaching. Beforehand.
But I think I think you're absolutely right. And someone once said to me, when I've seen a really great show, I'm empty. Being emptied out, not filled. I mean, you can't remember, you don't know what you're thinking. You've just been connected. You've connected with it in a very spiritual, very emotional way. And so let's come back to this idea of inclusivity, because we know one of the key things, and I'm glad that we brought up Under Siege, is, there are not enough narratives that have been told from alternative cultures. And this is a responsibility that I think we all have to consider, really, about, whose stories are we telling and how are they being allowed to be told? Because at the moment there is a dominant Western canon coming back, and these extraordinary stories from Asia, there are ocean of stories, endless stories, beautiful stories from China, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, which need to be told and need to be shared with the world for us to start breaking down, some of these kind of divisive thinking that we're actually having to kind of negotiate daily.
Right. And I think, going back to I want to hear Ling, because this is something that, because of this colonialism, right? That Western vernacular, that Eurocentric dominance, we as the other parts of the culture, we feel inferior even of ourselves.
Yeah, true.
And so that's, I'm curious to see from Ling's side and your interaction with artists, from China, where do they stay? How do they see themselves placed in the world? And how is all that training, which they're learning? Like we see, oh my God, the West is the greatest. How does that influence their own creation process, right? To make it accessible and inclusive.
I think there's a process that maybe 5 or 10 years ago, people will feel that maybe West is the best, that you have to learn contemporary, you have to look at Europe, you have to look at whatever that is. But recently, in China, right now, I think there's a new appreciation of traditional Chinese culture right now. Like many young kids, they want to dress up as if they are in the Han Dynasty, which is many years ago. And there's also traditional, it's really an interesting data that our festival, we just our festival, I just left. Anyway, our festival, we just premiered Shanghai's new work, the Integrate, this June in Shanghai. And we have a data collection to see what percentage, which age group, how many percentage of them went to see the show. And it's interestingly found that it's the same pattern as people go to see Yuezhu, which is one of the traditional Chinese opera. It's quite surprising for me, because in my previous understanding, I feel that many just elder ages people go to see traditional opera, but it's almost the same age pattern as the audience went to see Shanwei's contemporary dance. So it's really something interesting to me, that I feel there's a sort of rise of confidence in traditional Chinese culture, which I think is really rich, really,
that's fantastic.
And the Chinese painting, it's really amazing. I myself is learning Chinese painting, and I feel it's so different from oil painting or whatever, and it has its own beauty, it has its own philosophy. It's interesting, and I want to express that more to maybe audience or maybe the world.
I love that, Ling. This is really, it's a concept in Chinese culture called liu bai, white emptiness, where they leave the space in paintings and music and stuff. And I'm not, I learned this from this extraordinary, actually, Chinese singer that's living in America, that's doing this artist in residence at Strathmore, who's revisiting these ancient poems, Chinese poems called 9 Songs. And she's And I'm working with her to produce a show to come to London next year. But I think this confidence is really interesting. I see that emerging. It doesn't mean it's not contemporary. It doesn't mean it's not innovative. It doesn't mean it's not experimental. But what is really beautiful about it is the mining of traditional material, of sources, of aesthetics. Because that means it has a deeper sense of root and authenticity, which is not trying to replicate that, but trying to, recreate it for the contemporary mind rather than the contemporary form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind
agree.
Do you have?
And that's what. Sorry.
No, sorry.
I mean, I think that's what Tim Yip does a lot in his work. Tim Yip, he takes these very ancient ideas and he reimagines them for the modern world without destroying them. Yeah. Because that's very much Eastern thinking. We think about the pedagogy of Eastern education. I'm, an Asian, is not to destroy what your master's knowledge. No. While in the West, from very early on, kids are taught, tell me your version. I don't want you to tell me what I know. Destroy my version, show me a better way. Now, these are both different systems of learning, pedagogy of growth. And I think what's really can be interesting is how do we bring these beautiful systems together more in a way that's more on and not contrived and not dishonest and not for the sake of political correctness or what's trendy, but in a deeply rooted process.
But I think that process starts with, that's what I'm trying, I lived in China, not me alone, in the 80s, so obviously with my parents. I didn't go, okay, bye, I'm going to China. But my dad was very much forced by whatever, he worked in China, and his main force was collaboration. He said, if you really want to, you have to collaborate, you really have to work together, not just talk about, but really sit down, work together. So, and for me, I'm trying to pick up this process now. Again, I did this through my whole career, and now I'm working with a friend of mine because we want to create a theater piece, which is maybe more than theater, which maybe has some technology in it and some dance, but we want this to be a real collaboration with China. So not us telling a story which is then, performed by Chinese artists, but the actual starting point is to develop the story together. Because that's how we get both sides into the story. It's not one side or the other, but it's both worlds sitting at one table, and the basic idea already comes together. But so I totally agree with what you said, and I think that's one way to do it. And I'm absolutely excited about this project, if it's happening, and how, I don't know, but this is my main goal for the next 12 months, actually. And I hope traveling will be possible at one point. But my question is, what do you think, or maybe, I don't know, where does this confidence come from now? Why is it developing, not now because it's related to a certain date, but what do you think is the original? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's so interesting what you said, Ling, and it would be, I don't know, do you have an idea or a thought?
Well, for me, I think art always related to economy. Like, I feel it definitely go with the rise of the Chinese economy, that people are living better than maybe 10 or 20 years ago. Right. And also, I think it's a kind of, for this kind of, I don't know how to translate, we call it like 古风, like maybe go back to songs that has style of Asian Chinese songs. This this was actually a subculture when I was in college, maybe 15 years ago. It first it first grew on the internet, that people like to sing songs, just amateurs, they sing songs. And recently this subculture just grow bigger and bigger. And this it go with, of course, it go with the economy status, and also it go with the subculture, and maybe from the pop culture as well.
So there's this appreciation of the traditions, I think, again, I mean, being as an Asian here in the US growing up, you see like the East is always trying to shed. I think for growing up, we have this tendency, we wanted to shed our own traditional identity.
Absolutely.
But now there's this resurgence of trying to bring back and really understand through, whether it's pop culture, through the visual arts, to the art, performing arts, what those mean, what those cultures are, who is it, where are our roots? What does the roots is it talking about? And I see that also not just in China, but you see it also in Japan now, and you see it also in Korea, with their music. And a lot of musicians are trying to incorporate the traditional instrumentations with what's considered contemporary instruments, and how do you find that balance? So I do see there's that surge, at least from the Eastern perspective. So, which I think is great. And now it's, because like you said, you said it, Farooq, is like, as a West, we always like to come and just tell you guys, this is what you need to do, and how you talked about so important is that emptying that mind, right? Emptying that water, that glass, and just let the other person speak. But we need to be able to shed that ourselves to begin with. Because, I come from the West in a sense that, I grew up here. So in a way, half of my brain is thinking in the West. And so I have to also remind myself when I'm going elsewhere, that's not the West. It's like, okay, let's listen to what your standpoint is. What are you guys trying to say artistically? What are you guys trying to say culturally? And again, I think as an industry, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was a podcast that's with Darren Walker, who's the president of the Ford Foundation, and he said this, and he said this during his podcast. He said that we should be looking again, like the commercial versus the arts. He said maybe we should be how we reframe. How do we move out of our own selves, right? How should we be looking at the relationship between the commercial and the not-for-profit? Because he says we have as an industry, we have created a firewall between that the commercial is the unsavory, and then the not-for-profit, the arts world, is doing God's work.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned, you kind of said something similar, Farooq, and I think it's this thing, right? Like we just have to strip ourselves of that, like, that constant activism.
Yeah, I think, Cindy, and also let's think about the benefits of this. I mean, if we stop,
right.
we start listening, we start collaborating in an empty space. And I think going back to what Yan has said, because I'm also doing a show and a dance production, which I'm involved in directing, on the Legend of the Butterfly Lovers, which is a very famous Chinese story. And I realized as I started it that I was missing an essential part of that collaborative process, because once you set the rules out, you then have to create a language before you tell the story. I was just wanting to tell the story without looking for the language. And that language has to come from the collaborative nature of two languages. It has to emerge from that thing. Then it will have a truth. If it's just replicating something. So, and if we allow this thing to nourish us, the West, there's an invigoration of perspective. The Giselles of the future and the Carmens may be seen through a completely different cultural lens, right, in the way that we've got used to them, and you're right. There's, this all these divides that we create are crazy. It's not healthy. But no. Sorry, I'm jumping around. But I now want to say, but I think a culture that becomes confident creates an identity.
Yes.
And when you have the confidence of an identity, then you begin to have your confidence of your memory. Your memory becomes precious to you. It's not something you begin to reject. You begin to hold on to it. And every culture is built on cultural memory. And once we allow the cultural memory to be confidently connected with the identity, and then from the identity comes the voice, and from the voice comes the language, then these things begin to enrich people in the most incredibly surprising and beautiful ways. So I think that's what's happening in China, and I'm so relieved. It happened in India. It's happening in India, and you see that, like 20 years, the shift in India and it's been led by the young generation, which is beautiful. It's not like the old guard who are like, saying what's right and being sages with their wisdom. It's a young wisdom that's emerging from these new very ephemeral, very kind of porous type of mindsets of the young, which are absorbing many, many things. And if we don't listen to them, we're going to be left behind like dinosaurs.
But that's the thing, exactly what you just said. And there's a lot of conversation going on in Germany, not so much about culture, more about economics, I have to say. But I think it's the same energy, and they are scared because all of a sudden they feel like they're, like what Cindy also said, the West is like a little bit on a podest. We are looking from here and telling everyone what to do and how to think and how to do things. And now we realize that like China, for example, becomes stronger. The strength that you, like Ling, what you said, like this confidence comes out of the strength that comes out also, of course, of an economy. And now instead, and this for me is so interesting. I have so many conversations about this in like the past days, because I hear this word, oh, we have to be careful, and this is dangerous. And I always think, why? It's not dangerous, and we don't have to be careful. Why not collaborate? There's so much potential in this collaboration if we stop being scared, getting pushed off our podest where we should not have been in the first place, to be honest. I mean, who are we being the world police and telling everyone how to look at things? Because I mean, our culture is not older, younger, better, worse than everyone else's culture, but we behave like this once in a while. And I think, the Western, we go to other countries and we behave like, we don't even listen anymore because we're like, but we know better anyways. We know how to do things.
I think there's a word for it, Jan, it's called homophily, which means love of the same.
Turn this around and start seeing the good in this. Like, what I love about this whole conversation, by the way, is that we didn't talk about COVID at all so far. It came up, and it's one of the best conversations I had in a long time, where this virus was not even a topic, but just, it's the same. Like that's something Cindy and I said throughout all the conversation. There's always a huge chance in crisis, and not saying that is a crisis, but there is a chance in change as well. So why not look at it in a positive way and use that? I mean, thank God China and all the other countries, are finding their strength and are finally, getting that power out there. I mean, this is good for all of us. It's not dangerous, and it's not about enemies. We're not enemies at all. We live on the same planet, for God's sake. I mean, hello, we all have the same intention.
I agree, I mean, but it's that strange thing about human beings, isn't it? We spend so much of our energy looking for what doesn't connect us rather than what connects us.
I know.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, and it's, I joked with someone the other day, is that strange thing in human beings where we want to feel individually we were put on this world for something special and unique to us. However, we can't do that alone. We got to have it with other people. So we need to belong at the same time. And so we are, our psyche is so, binary in that kind of wanting to be special, but wanting to belong. And I think, and I also feel like what's happening in the world now, because when I first started working with Akram, I benefited from the context of globalization. Akram and Sidi Larbi came at a time in the world where globalization was so powerful. And it's not a surprise, 20 years on, we're all freaking out because now everyone's gone, but who am I in this big global narrative? I've lost my own personal identity. So now we have the rise of nationalism, the rise of, the local, the domestic, because people are so scared of being lost in the globalized narrative. Right. So it's been a real shift.
Sidi Larbi and Akram Khan, just taking those two as an example, and I don't know if it's them as a person or like the teams or whatever, they were smart enough, like some of, to see the chance and to see the positive and the chance and the challenge in that whole globalization, rather than, hiding in the corner saying, oh no, now I have to run it. Like, Yang Li-ping probably did the same thing, I suppose. I mean, she went the other side. I mean, she went from China to So there are people out there who do get that whole thing. That's what I'm trying. And I have to say, I'm very, very positive that there are still many people out there getting, but I think, like, going back to the education teaching part, I think maybe we can take people by the hand one by one, or maybe little groups, and say, listen, maybe try to look at this in a different way. Try to look at this, you know, as a chance, and as a, like, for me, when I read books about other traditions, stories, history, it's opening my mind. It's not closing my mind. It makes, you know, it does this. That's why I love biographies. I love reading about other people's journey through life, because I'm like, oh my God, how much can they squeeze into a whole life? That's insane. I love that, you know?
And it's human stories that really connect us, isn't it? It's the story of a person you've met. It's the story of your first love. It's the story of your colleagues, the story of your company. All of these are stories, and you know, and we are cultures. If you think, I never called Akram Khan company a company. It's actually a culture that we created, and you know, and we do that thing. But I think you're absolutely right, Yana. It's like, you know, we have to be optimistic. But you know, one of the challenges I think we face is the world's moving at a very fast speed, and for this to work, my feeling is that we need to slow down a bit with this stuff.
That's what COVID taught us, just finding the good and try to be there as well. I mean, not saying that having a pandemic is a good thing. I mean, but it's true. But it taught me, we had this, like, because Cindy said that earlier, that she's a control freak. I mean, so am I, and so is probably everyone in that call, kind of, I guess.
Yes, sure.
But it taught me that not having control over something that I obviously can't control, if so, I would have gotten the Nobel Prize already. I'm okay. It's fine. It's okay not to be in control. And it doesn't mean that the world stops turning. It just goes a bit slower. And in that, I mean, looking back on the last 15 months, I couldn't do a lot of things I was supposed to do and I wanted to do, and, you know, but at the same time, I did a lot of things I had time for the first time in my life. I think I said that to my mom yesterday, because she was like, oh, so how are you? And I was like, you know, I never had that much time ever since I went to school when I was like 5 years old or 7. So it has, and slowing down definitely is one thing which I absolutely appreciate. Because it has its own magic, and it has its own doors in my mind that they would have never opened without slowing down. Never.
I think that, sorry, Ling, I don't want to, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but I'll just say one thing, but I think this thing about control is really important, because I think what we've learned is we have to surrender ourselves to liberate ourselves. And this idea that control keeps us free is a falsehood. It's a mythological idea. You know, we surrender, and that's a very Asian concept, by the way, surrendering, you know, to the forces, the energies around you, to be at one with them. That then liberates us in the most extraordinary ways. And now I'll shut up. Sorry.
I just want to comment on that. The COVID slow us down, which is good, I think. Otherwise, you just run into everyday routine. You just repeat one-on-one, or after this project, you went to another project. But the COVID give you a time to take a break and to think what is important to you, and to reflect, maybe.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, look, if it wasn't for the pandemic, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, right? Like, I mean, this whole series really came out of us sitting with all these extra times in our hand, and, you know, and I also do see this, you know, and this is when I was forcing my artists to be uncomfortable. Like I said, you have to try to engage in this platform of this virtual platform. And that was a process that I also myself had to learn, and I also have to teach them how to be, you know, to be used to it, because in a way it's, you know, I do see this like moving forward, right? Like, I mean, I want to really close by getting your thoughts on, what do you guys see us moving forward? I mean, I certainly see this as a positivity, and I want to really encourage everyone to completely grab on to this, you know, idea that risk is okay, uncomfortness is okay, and this is what's gonna propel our industry forward, and that's when we'll really be able to see the change. I don't know what your thoughts are, because I'm, you know, we're of course thinking about the next step. I see it as a really bright future for us, but we have to be able to really, you know, I think my motto has always been just keeping an open mind and an open heart. And that's when everything can happen. And, you know, I mean, I'll let everyone to do their final thoughts on what they see is that, you know, next after all of this craziness. Ooh, everyone's thinking. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, it could be.
No, but I know. I was going to wait for Ling to speak, but the thing is, I'm with you. I'm with Yana, I'm with Cindy, and I'm sure Ling feels the same. I think we're about to enter a golden age of really beautiful creative expression based on a different set of values, based on different perspectives, and not what we had before. And I'm really looking forward to being part of that, experiencing it, you know, being privileged, and, you know, to enter that. And I think that's really special. I think we've also learned that with privilege, we have an enormous amount of power, and we can use that more responsibly than we have in the past. I think that we're learning that there are many speeds to the world. There's the speed of trust, I said that earlier, but there's a speed of money, and there's a speed of activism. And I think we recognize there are different motorways, and we get out the right lane and we go into the right one, rather than think we can all do them in the same lane. Maybe, you know, help us to achieve more by going a bit slower. Know that, you know, we do more by going slower. But I'm looking forward to the stories that will emerge us, you know, and I hope they're not all about COVID. I think COVID.
I know, no one was.
No dance pieces about COVID. No operas about COVID.
No, please, no.
No. Did that, done, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I also maybe looking at the future when we enter a more digitalized world. We all in China, we say that COVID somehow somehow pressed a pause button for the performing arts industry, but for me, it somehow posed an accelerate button for the future of performing arts, maybe. Like, though we have this film theater, live streaming, all the different way of how you transfer performing arts to different digital means, but also you can see the use of virtual reality. There's also new ways, new space, new virtual space that maybe have more opportunity for performing arts, and the future of this digital means, which is I myself is interested in looking at.
Awesome.
I totally agree, and just to pick that thought up shortly, Ling, is I agree. I totally agree with what you said, and I think that's something I think COVID brought up. Like, there was kind of it speeded up some process that would have happened anyways in the last 15 months. But actually, there's some, and I think the digital area, like when it comes to performing arts, that got speeded up by COVID. And actually, I think it's good. Because as you said, you know, I mean, that's also another talk on its own. Like, what does, you know, how is that actually supporting the performing arts rather than just being a solution for COVID? Because that's going to be over at one point, thank God. But I think there is something much, much, much more to this, to AR, to, you know, all this kind of, that is not just a solution, but that came out of that period. I totally agree. And I think this whole talk, I mean, thank you guys so much. It was absolutely inspiring. It was absolutely beautiful. And I think Rethink and Reform, I mean, that process has started. And actually for me, I think it's so good to see that we're in the middle of the process already. And I mean, it's like you said, Farooq, it's like we're heading into a new age. And I think it's a great age when it comes to performing arts. And thank God there is a lot of rethinking happening, and out of that rethinking is a reforming. And I think it's really like, for me, from my personal point of view, I'm totally excited about what's going to come.
And I think just to add to that, Yana, maybe we also have to think, let's not take ourselves too seriously.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Let's have humor as we move forward. We were getting crazy. We were getting like, oh no, like this thing, standing there like gods, thinking it's a weightiness to our humanity, and we're not. We're funny people, and we're
quote yesterday. I don't remember it literally, but I love Ricky Gervais. He's like one of my. And I wrote this quote about him yesterday, saying that of course you can say something funny about everything. There's no way that you cannot use whatever happens on this bloody planet and make a joke out of it. And that's what I love about British humor, by the way, because it's so sarcastic and it's so to the point, and we need to laugh, and we need to exactly not take ourselves, we need to take everything serious, but not too seriously. It's
absolutely. I agree. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you all. And one last question, which we've been asking all our guests, is that if you can, once all the borders are completely freely, more fluid than it is currently now, where would you want to go if you can get on a plane?
Well, I want to go back to China. I miss it. I'm looking forward to go back there. But that's professionally. I mean, personally, I'm going to go with my partner to Thailand on a beach and just just lie there, and burn myself to a crisp. And for me, that takes a long time. I'm telling you, right? It's like, so personally, a beach in Thailand. Professionally, China.
Nice. Ling?
Yeah. My last destination before the COVID was actually UK. And after COVID, I want to go to Greenland.
Greenland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's sort of like a dream destination when I was a little child. It's quite ridiculous for now. I was reading a map and I found this place was totally white. So I'm quite curious about this place.
Greenland.
Well, thank you both. It was so, we did, I think we provoked even ourselves, just to think very differently. And we just need to be a little bit more brave, a little bit more courageous as we move forward. And it's one person at a time. We're not doing God's work. As quoting Darren. Yeah, I know. As Darren Walker was quoting, we're not, and we shouldn't think we are. And it's about having fun. So thank you. This was such an amazing conversation. My brain is already tingling. Thank you to all the audiences for tuning in today. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to comment. And we will see you very shortly for our next episode. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.